Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour, brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. And on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. This week, we have the pleasure to welcome in one of the busiest men in MMA, freelance journalist, James Lynch. James, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Big fan of the show. And I also work for All Access. This is great. It's kind of puts everything together here. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you for coming, man. I mean, you and I actually contribute to a lot of the same places. So, thanks to you. I know you hooked me up with the one gig, but we've definitely again. One of the things that that hit me after we were chatting earlier today through messaging was that I think now that we've had you on, we've pretty much had the original band of Flow Combat on this podcast because we've had Hunter, we had Nolan, and you. I think the only one missing is Dwayne.
Yeah, and Dwayne's tough to track down, so I would almost put that as like a mulligan. But yeah, you know what? It's funny you mentioned Flow because like I was thinking about that the other day of like what that site could have been, and it's such a bummer because like that there was so much potential there, and you know, I know it's a business and I know they got to do things the way they do it, but we had a really good team back then, and it's kind of a bummer what happened. But hey, I mean that's life. What site? I was just thinking, what site did I? Don't mean to change topics here. What site did I end up hooking you up with? I don't remember that.
MMAnews.com.
Oh, I was okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was through you that you gave me the contact info, and then they brought me on after I sent them my stuff, and now they have me doing the Sunday video thing and
Sunday submission every Sunday, guys. Yeah. MMA News, got to go check it out. There you go. Yeah.
Before you met Ed, what got you into MMA? What led you to the media side of it?
I'll give you the short version because the long version we won't have enough time for. But no, I always tell people this. I wanted to be a hockey broadcaster, hockey reporter. That was always the goal. And then when I got in college, I got hooked on The Ultimate Fighter, started watching the UFC, started watching Pride. I was a tough noob, as they called us back in the day. And from there, it was like, just a fan. And then I ended up working at the time when I was going to university, I ended up moving to Toronto for an internship. And then I ended up working at the Fight Network. Which was crazy because Mauro Ranallo was there at the time, John Pollock. There was just a lot of really talented people there at the time. And it's finally like, I'm getting to work in an environment where there's people who speak my language. Because, back, if you guys remember back in like 2005, 2006, the MMA was like, there was only like a select few people that would like watch the cards and stuff. It was like kind of this cool secret that everyone had. So like, I remember like trying to get my friends to watch it, and some of them were into it, but not as much as I was. And then from there, it was just, years later, just started freelancing on the side, got my first ever like paid gig. Outside of Fight Network, obviously was at MMA Oddsbreaker, which Nick Kalikas, if you guys see him on that show they do on UFC Fight Pass, I owe him a ton for my career because he's the guy that really took a chance on me early on. And basically fast forward to October of 2017, I became a dad and I couldn't do the freelance stuff on the side and have a full-time job. I was working in digital media, and I talked to my wife and sort of sat down and we crunched the numbers. I was like, you know what, I could probably do this full-time if I just like got on with a few other outlets, and that's basically what I did. So I left my job and did freelance up until May of 2019. Ended up being brought on by a company that hired me as their senior MMA news editor. That ended in July, and now I'm back to freelancing. So there you go. So there's the short version. But it was the Ultimate Fighter that really got me into MMA. And I'll just add in one more little tidbit too. Like I was a pro wrestling fan like early in my life for a couple of years during the Attitude Era. So I think that sort of fandom for pro wrestling also came into MMA as well, because like you sort of gravitated towards certain fighters, and that's what got me into being a fan.
Where did the podcast fit in there, real quick?
So yeah, no problem. So the podcast started initially was an audio podcast. This is how far back this was. So Adam Martin, a buddy of mine who I ended up meeting on Twitter, but we both lived in Toronto at the time. Adam was also freelancing as well for MMA Oddsbreaker, and we ended up doing it was initially started as an audio podcast. Then I started doing like a separate part of the podcast, which was just the video interviews. And that was sort of like my thing. And it was just like, it was called like, I think it was called like the Parting Shot One-on-One or something like that. And then I did that up until, and then that sort of carried on up until May of 2019. But now the podcast is just me on my own doing it on my channel. But initially it was Adam Martin and I who started doing it. And it's Adam's still a good friend. He actually came to my wedding back a couple of years ago. And it's just crazy like how we've still been around in this industry.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. I mean, I think you just mentioned it. One of the questions I had for you was because I remember when when you first came up on my feeds and stuff, and I started watching your content was I think it was Parting Shot. That's the one that had like the orange and gray graphic
Yes.
theme.
Yeah, the orange
Yeah.
graphic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I first found out about you, and then when we finally met in New York, when I think that was Bellator's first card, or no, that was the first UFC when we met in New York when you were with Flo,
It was
right?
one of them. I was there for Bellator too. Yeah, it was. It might have been 205 was the first one. I was there for Sportsnet, but I know Dwayne and Hunter were there for Flow because that was like one of their first like couple events that I think they were doing. So, but I think it was one of them. Either way, I remember meeting you years ago. That bar in New York, I can't remember the name of it, but we went there all the time after. Remember when they used to do shows in New York? So
Beer Authority, yeah.
Yes, that's the one.
But then obviously we had a few more beers at every other time in New York that you were there for the Brooklyn card with UFC 208 when it was me, you, Hunter, and the not that John Jones, who was
the other John Jones. Yeah, that's right.
So no, I mean it's a long time, but it's doesn't feel that long ago until you start looking back at it. But with your career, one of the things I wanted to ask you, I had tweeted a comment at you when you had talked about how you're doing the freelance gigs for all the places that you write for or contribute to now. I was saying it to Matt before you came on too. What does it feel like to see so many, like you see ESPN and everybody doing, it's pretty much what I call the James Lynch interview style, which is, the screen, split and you and the athlete with a nice graphic. It's like, I feel like you're kind of the OG or the originator of that. So how do you feel when you see that? I mean, I know you're not somebody that likes to pat his own back, but I just was curious as to your take.
Well, I actually wasn't the first. So for me, I actually sort of got that model from Frank Trigg. Frank Trigg actually used to do interviews to MMA Oddsbreaker, and I remember seeing him do it, and I was like, I can do this. And I didn't want to step on Frank's toes, so at the time I really focused on prospects. Like if you go back and watch, I've done I don't know how many interviews for like Titan FC back in the day, like all these smaller promotions, and so that's like I was probably the one that like did the most at the time, and I think even now I'm still doing more video interviews than anyone else. But I knew this was going to happen because when the pandemic hit, like I remember when, and by the way, I love talking about this stuff. I don't get to talk about this enough. The industry, it's so interesting to me because there's no like clear cut path on like where to go. So I always love like sharing stories. But I remember do you guys remember when the pandemic hit? And I remember Ariel had Colby Covington on his show, and he did like an Instagram live thing. And I remember thinking like, this is at ESPN and you guys are doing like an Instagram live. I was like, figured you guys would do what I was doing, which is like the split screen. Now they're doing it. But do you remember initially, like they were just doing sort of the Instagram live thing. And I remember thinking like, this is kind of surprising coming from ESPN. And I'm not throwing shade at them. I think they just didn't know how to prepare for that. And I was surprised that more people didn't start doing video interviews. But to your point, I do notice now that like there's so many people doing video interviews now. Like when I started, there was like me, Frank Trigg, Karen Bryant did MMA Heat, which was like a remote video thing as well. But that was it. There wasn't many of us out there. And then, of course, a lot of people that were doing audio into video, like Mike Heck and, others as well, who've sort of, made that transition to video. But I think it's cool. Like people know me as the video guy. I'll take it. I mean, it's been sort of, it was just a thing I figured out and, I was able to make money off it and made it into a career. I never thought I'd be doing this. It's crazy.
I got a prediction for you. This is what's going to happen for your career.
Yeah.
Some streaming app is gonna scoop you up to make you their exclusive guy. So it's not gonna be DAZN, but something like that is gonna scoop you up and you're gonna be the guy for that, because I really do think. I mean, I know you said you're not the originator, but I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean everybody's biting your style. So I mean, take it as a compliment. And
look at Ed fishing here for another free beer here, man. I appreciate it. That's great. No, seriously, I really appreciate it. But yeah, I just like what I do, and I'm glad that people like I'm glad that people like what I do. You know what I mean? Like it's cool for me that way. And yeah, look, if the right opportunity came around, I'm open to whatever at this point. I like freelancing right now. It's nice. I sort of control everything. I can, choose when I want to work. I can choose to, like today, I had a really busy day today, but I can take sort of tomorrow and make it a little bit easier. I can focus on writing and doing some other stuff. So I like that freedom there. But yeah, it would have to be sort of the right situation. But I will say, and I've mentioned this on my podcast, like I'm not moving. I love being back here in Vancouver. I moved back here in 2018. This is where I grew up. And that's one thing where, I've been pretty adamant about, like, I'm not leaving. I love being back home. I'm on West Coast time again. Matthew knows what I'm talking about here with the time zones. It's much easier fights, and just my family's here and stuff too. And I got a 3-year-old, so it's nice to just be back home with family. But yeah, if something came up and it was remote, I'm totally down. And I know most of those jobs are, but I just throw that out there anyways, because people are like ESPN or whatever, and it's like, yeah, if they made me move, I don't think I'd take it. Honestly, I don't think I would. I love being back here. It's great.
So, when I started doing this podcast with Ed, a lot of it for me was just to keep being around the sport. Just a fan, done some writing, but just a major fan of the sport for a couple decades now. So I had an opportunity to meet a lot of the fighters throughout all the years. For you kind of jumped into the media stuff a little quicker. I know you said you were a tough noob, so there was a gap there. Was there ever a point where you interviewed somebody and what was the first time you were really starstruck? Or maybe you're not starstruck, but what was the first interview you did where you were like, holy shit, that's Fedor, that's Brock Lesnar or Couture, whoever the heck it was. Did you ever have a situation like that?
Well, I just remember like my first big interview back in the day, and it's someone that I still interview on a regular basis now, and it's Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I mean, this was a couple years ago, not like a Fedor or anything, but yeah, back then that was big. I remember covering the McGregor Diaz card, the first one where Diaz won. That was the first event I ever covered in Vegas, so that was crazy. I didn't I just being around Conor McGregor doing like the media scrum and stuff, that was cool. I remember doing, this was years later, but when they did the press conference for the Maymac, they did one in Toronto, and I got like a couple seconds with Floyd Mayweather, but still, like, to get to talk to him, that was pretty cool. I'll tell you another one, and this actually ties into what Ed was talking about in New York. I got to interview Herschel Walker. Like, that was friggin' awesome, man. Like, I'm not even like a big football fan, but like, I remember growing up watching Herschel Walker like on TV, and like to get to interview him like at a Bellator event, I thought was super cool. But you guys know, I mean, I assume, I don't know if you know this, Matt, but Ed, you know this, like Gegard Mousasi is like my favorite fighter ever. And so to get to interview him like one-on-one, like in person and stuff, was also like definitely bucket list, because I'm just a huge fan of his. I love watching him fight.
Is that because the Fight Network used to carry all those the dream events and stuff, didn't they, back then? Is that where you kind of got into him? Yeah, and like, and I just, there was something about him because he was such an awkward guy. You know what's so funny about Gegard too is that if you go and watch like his old like post-fight interviews, he's really awkward. Like, it wasn't like how he is now, where he's very clever and kind of funny. He's like learned how to like channel that into humor. But like, if you go watch his like post-fight interview when he fought in K1, it's really awkward. And I just found something fascinating about that, where you have this guy who's so like kind of, a little bit nerdy, almost like outside the cage, and then inside the cage is this killer. Like when he upkicked Jacare, or when he submitted Dennis Kang, like there was all these moments that I remember in his career where it's like, oh my God, this guy's like incredible. And there's just no one like him in the sport. Even now, like there's no one like Gegard. It's rare. He's a very unique guy.
Yeah, he I spoke to him March, the week of the pandemic, was the week the pandemic launched, because they had the Bellator presser in Viacom that Monday. And I mean, he was, like you said, he was there. He wasn't dressed up. He had just a sweatshirt on and a pair of jeans, and he was super. He actually made a comment that's what kind of like, when I interviewed him, I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, He's like, "I don't really feel like fighting when I lose. It's usually because I just really don't feel like fighting, but this time I feel like fighting, so I think I'll do well." And I just thought that was such a funny comment from him, but super nice guy, and I can see why he's fun to talk to. The thing you said about how you don't get to do enough stuff about the industry related stuff, you used to do on your YouTube channel, and I know it's probably a time issue, but are you ever going to bring back the MMA industry podcast thing you used to do?
Yeah, we'll see. If I could find an outlet that would be willing to let me do it, and I could, because it's time's money. Like, everything I do is pretty much like, if I like, I get a lot of the outlets I work for, it's paper content. So like, if I'm doing content, it basically means like, how am I spending my hour? So I mean, I do the podcast on my channel. I do that every week. I do a Q&A every week. Those are the sort of the two like free things I do every week. I'll consider it. The problem is obviously viewership. Like, I think that it just doesn't bring in the type of, numbers that I think an outlet would want. Like, when I was doing it for Fightful, they were cool with it. And then they obviously were like, well, the views aren't good, so we got to switch up. But I just thought it was unique. Like, and I think there is an audience for people like us who, are fascinated by the industry and learning about how people, blaze their path, so to speak, because it's just not talked about. Like, there's no blueprint. I get people hitting me up all the time, asking me about advice and like how I do this and that. And it's like, and I'm happy to do it, because like, there was really no one for me when I got in there. I had to figure it out on my own. And, I definitely made some mistakes early on. So I think it's really interesting. Like, just, the people that work in this industry. And I think there's a big misconception too, with a lot of fans of the media that covers the industry. Like, I mean, you guys know this, but like, if you had to give a percentage of people that like do this full time, that have like a salary job for like one outlet, it's probably like 20% of the industry. Most people are people that just, do this on the side and have a day job, because it's just not a lucrative industry to make a living in. I mean, I can do it, but that also, I'm probably working way harder than a lot of other people. I got so much going on where I'm able to make it work. And thank God I am, because like, I mean, I was ready after things, I left my previous job. I wasn't sure. I was like thinking maybe I got to go back to, digital media. Maybe I got to start digging ditches. Like, it doesn't matter. I knew I wanted to do this on the side, but the fact that I'm able to do it full time is awesome. So yeah, I'm to answer your question, that was kind of a long answer. Yeah, I'd love to bring it back. It just has to be the right situation.
Yeah. I guess we should get into the predictions for UFC 253. Because you are a busy man, and I know you got some stuff lined up for later that you can feel free to plug whenever you want. By the way, I dropped the link to your YouTube channel in the description of this, so
awesome.
Folks could check out James' stuff there. But I know Matt likes to start from the first main right, Matt? You like to start from the first fight in the card?
Yeah,
right.
We can start it there. That's the top 5. So the opening bout right now scheduled, Hakeem Dawood. You can help me out. Dawadu, I'm sorry. and this one, Zabari Tuhugov.
I butchered his name too on the podcast Monday. It's
yeah,
don't worry. Vieira, I don't know. Habib's teammate. That's what I refer to him as.
ZT. I'll go with the guy. I can't pronounce his name in the Russian. I'm not super up on. I mean, I know Dawadu. But
stop trying, Matt. Just don't tell us your pick.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go with the Russian by decision because Russians win a lot of fights by decision.
Yeah, I mean, I know Hakeem quite well. I followed his career, sort of leading, before the UFC. If you remember, he was in World Series of Fighting as well. He had a really bad UFC debut. If you remember, he lost to Danny Henry in like seconds, got submitted real quick, but he hasn't lost since. And Hakeem's, I still think we haven't seen the best Hakeem Dawodu yet. He trains at a Champions Creed in Calgary, which is not like a super like gym or anything like that. He's just sort of like the big dog there at that gym, but he hasn't fought in a while. So that's a bit concerning. He last fought actually at UFC 244, where he got that split decision win over Julio Arce. So a bit of a layoff coming into this one, almost, well, not a year, but almost close enough. And Zubiara, he came off a nice win over Kevin Aguilar in his last fight. Aguilar's a pretty tough guy to finish, and he finished him in the first round. So really impressive win here. I'm with you guys though. I'm going with the Russian here. I think the layoff. I think the fact that both guys have been kind of inconsistent. Like even Dawadu's had some wins, but like I said, he's been undefeated, I should say, since his debut. But he just hasn't like blown me away with what I think he's capable of. It might be this fight. Maybe he does look amazing in this one, but I got to go on the guy who's shown a little bit more in the cage, and that's the Russian. So I'm going to go with him in this fight, and I'll take him by decision as well, because Hakeem pretty tough to finish outside of that loss that he had, which was by submission.
Yeah, I think I'm with you guys. I'm going with Khabib's teammate, like you said. If you train with that man, you probably have a slight edge over a lot of other people. But yeah, so that's what I'll go with too. I won't be unique in my decision on that one.
Then that moves us to Caitlin Vieira versus Sijara Eubanks. Eubanks coming off of 2 big wins just recently over
Sarah Morris and Julia Avila.
And Caitlin Vieira coming off of the devastating KO loss to Irina Aldana at UFC 245. Initially Vieira, because she was undefeated 10-0, but I feel like maybe Eubanks is going to start living up to a little bit of that Ultimate Fighter hype. I mean, most people thought she would have probably walked away with the championship had she been able to make weight and not have issues around the finale. So I'm going to go with Sijara Eubanks. Her record is not that impressive at 7-4, but I feel like she's the up and comer. I'll also go by submission, maybe late round TKO if they end up if she ends up on top on the ground. But I lean Eubanks in this one. I think she's on the way up here.
Yeah, this is a closer fight than people give it credit for. Vieira on paper is the better fighter. She's younger. She's got a height and reach advantage in this fight. Hasn't fought since December. I mean, I think the only edge here Sarge has is that she's really strong and that she has 2 wins this year already. Like you mentioned, Vieira hasn't fought since that knockout loss to Aldana, which would have got her a title shot. You guys remember if she would have beat Aldana, she was going to fight Amanda Nunes next. That didn't happen. Aldana hypes, sort of halted that. This is just a case of where I think it's like, the better fighter on paper against momentum. Like Eubanks has the momentum. She's looked great in her last 2 fights. I mean, Avila was a favorite heading in the last fight, and Eubanks ended up shocking everyone and just dominated her. So it's possible we could see the same thing here. Am I going to go pick her though? I'm not. Eubanks, people forget. Well, people don't forget, but I mean, she's not young. She's 35 years old. So Vieira is, a lot younger at 29. I think she's hitting the prime of her career right now. I think as long as she doesn't make any mistakes, as long as she doesn't get overconfident in this fight, I think Vieira probably takes the decision. Most women's fights goes the distance. I think Eubanks hasn't had a finish in a very long time. So not since the Ultimate Fighter in 2017. So I'll go with that. I'll go with Vieira by decision in this fight. But if you're looking to bet this, I mean, if the line gets a little crazy here, I would even throw a little bit on Eubanks just because I think this is a 50-50 fight. I really do, just because Eubanks has that momentum, really strong, really turned things around since, really focusing our camps with Mark Henry. So we'll see what happens, but Vieira is going to be the pick.
It's funny you say that, James. I actually have that in my notes that I have it as 50-50. But I am concerned with Eubanks, coming off of the quick turnaround for her because of her age and stuff like that. But like you said, as far as betting, I mean, I actually bet her last time and won some money. So it's hard for me not to, when we like bet folks that like to gamble, that they get that feeling like lucky fighter or whatever you want to call it. So, I like you said, I'll watch the lines to make a decision as far as betting goes. But I actually, because of the frequency of how often she's fought, plus it's over there in Abu Dhabi, I feel like Vieira might actually take the win in this one. And then we got to move on to the next one. Oh, we had Brandon on this podcast a couple weeks ago.
Yep. Third bout of the main card, Brandon Royval, alumni of the show, takes on Kai Kara France, former Ryzen fighter, and 2 of the top 12 ranked flyweights in the world here. Ed, why don't you take the lead on this? You can tell us what you think first off.
I'll actually default to James because I know he's on a schedule. So James, why don't you let us know who you think?
Yeah, no worries. I actually like Royval for the upset here. He's the underdog in this one, and I know he's only had 1 UFC fight, and that was a fight where he's an underdog as well against Tim Elliott. But Brandon Royval has a height and reach advantage in this fight, and I kind of feel like Kai Kara France, although he's won his last couple fights, I kind of feel like he's being a little bit overvalued, and I think part of that is because he trains at City Kickboxing. He does have a nice win over Tyson Nam, who's now come off back-to-back wins since beating him. Lost to Brandon Moreno, but his other wins, Mark De La Rosa, Paiva was a split fight. I mean, it wasn't, that could have gone either way. The Elias Garcia fight as well. I kind of feel like he's being a bit overlooked or a bit overhyped here. And I think Royval, I think he was a guy that should have been in the UFC a while ago. Really good wins on the regional scene. Even his losses, they were losses that, had some circumstances, like when he lost to Casey Kenny. That was a short notice fight. Kenny fights at bantamweight now. He was a very big flyweight at the time. So I kind of give Royval a pass on that one. But, Royval's one of those guys at Factory X that really puts the work in. He's got a good camp. He's getting to train with guys like, Chris Gutierrez, Jonathan Martinez, Yusuf Salal. Alex Hernandez is in there now, which, by the way, Hernandez is going to be cornering him for this fight. Something tells me that I could see lightning striking twice here with Royval and just, surprising a lot of people, because I think a lot of people don't know how good this kid is, and he's just getting better every fight. So I'm going Royval by decision for the upset. I think he gets it done, and I think he surprises a lot of people. And I think this could be his coming out party at flyweight to really move up the rankings real quick with a big win here over the City Kickboxing product.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not just because he's been on the podcast, but Royval, he actually, what he said when I asked him about his training and stuff, he said that we talked about him being how he gets in a state of flow when he fights, and the whole thing where Miguel Torres is one of the fighters that he tries to emulate. Who I used to love Miguel Torres back in the day, so I was just like, you know what, man? I mean, that's the type of fighter that it's hard for me not to root for. So I'm taking Brandon in this one too.
Glad to hear you guys say that. I was leaning that way. France is a pretty active fighter, but now that I see that, James, you bring up the height difference, and Moreno was 5'7", and that was the guy who gave France this toughest fight really in the UFC so far, gave him a loss. So I won't disagree. I see it kind of as a coin flip fight. I don't think there's a finish. I think I think if there is a finish, it'll be Royval catching something on France. I don't think it can go the other way around, very likely. But yeah, I'll go with you guys. I'll take Royval by decision. I think this could be the fight of the night category right here too. I think this
Oh
is the
yeah,
action-packed flyweight event fight that seems to pop out almost every event.
absolutely. Then we got the guys gunning for the 205er.
Yeah,
Reyes
so
and Blachowicz.
first time without Jones or Cormier, and what is it, James? 11 years, 12
Yeah,
years.
it's got to be got to be a while. What Shogun was the last one, or was it? Yeah, it was Shogun that
Shogun,
beat, right?
yeah.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
crazy.
So first time we're going to crown a new light heavyweight champion, 205-pound division. Dominic Reyes coming off a loss to Jones against Jan Blachowicz, who's been on a roll, dropping hammers on people left and right. Gosh, I kind of see this as like almost a blown up version of somewhat what we might see in the main event as well, body type wise and even somewhat strategy wise. But I want to go with Jan. I think it would be cool to have a Polish champion in the UFC, but I think Reyes is just too smart of a fighter, and I think that he'll avoid any kind of major fisticuffs as far as phone booth fighting. Um, and I don't think he'll be able to be taken down. His takedown defense is held up fairly strong against some guys, top guys at the 205. So I'm going to go with Reyes. I'm going to go 5-round fight. I want to go decision, but I have a feeling somebody's going to get tired. I'll go with Reyes by a finish mid-4th round.
That's exactly how I'm going on this fight too. Initially when this fight was announced, I thought, man, this is kind of a 50-50 fight, but I really dug into the stats a little bit. I'm a stats guy. That's how I like sort of looking at stuff. And I kind of realized that, this is a spot where, Jan is the underdog heading into this fight, but you got to look at who he finished in his last couple of fights too. Corey Anderson, a guy who, had the big upset over Walker and, sort of had this chip on his shoulder. Like, I'm the guy that you've been disrespecting all these years. And I think Anderson, if anything, sort of lost that for himself. And we've seen Anderson knocked out before too. Like, it's not just this fight. He's had issues before he's been knocked out. So I kind of feel like that was blown up a little bit. And then he knocked out Luke Rockhold, which, Rockhold, ever since he got knocked out by Bisping, or even before that, he's had some chin issues. So I feel like those two really impressive wins. You got to look at who he's defeated there in that sense. And the win over Souza was good. It was a split decision. But Blachowicz outside those two fights hasn't really blown me away that much. And you look a couple fights before, he got knocked out by Thiago Santos, right? So and let's not forget either that Blachowicz is 37 years old. So Reyes is going to definitely have a nice youth advantage in this one. Now, what was the big issue with Reyes in the Jones fight is that he slowed down as the fight went on. People felt like that's why he had to give it to Jones because he won the last couple rounds. Well, guess what? Dominic Reyes took care of that, went to Colorado, training at Elevation Fight Team with Curtis Blades. You got to have good cardio if you're in Colorado because of that elevation. So I think that was a great move for him getting to work out there with guys like, Curtis Blades and Nick Rorick, who he trains with back in California. He came out there with him as well. So from what I can tell, Reyes has had a really good camp heading into this fight. And I just think he knows too that he was that close to defeating John Jones. That's got to give you some extra confidence too going into this fight as well. So I think Reyes, I'm with you. I think he gets a late finish as opposed to a decision. Reyes has had some fights where, he's only really had one bad fight, and that was the Ozdemir fight where I think he lost. But outside of that, he's looked pretty good overall. Got a first-round finish over Weidman, got as far as I'm concerned, a finish over OSP. I know they didn't count it that way, but he did finish him at the last minute, and they didn't count that one. So I'm going to go Reyes by late finish. I think he gets it done, and I think it's he's going to show that he is, the best 205er right now in the world.
Yeah, that's another one we're all on the same page for. I'm going Reyes as well. My only difference is I think he does go to a decision because Blachowicz has obviously been looking pretty good. He's coming off a win. Reyes coming off of the decision loss. But I do think that Reyes can pull off the W here on Saturday night. And then we got the one that Dana White is calling to be Fight of the Year candidate, the main event, Arasanya versus Costa.
Wow. Yeah, this is a fight that a lot of people have been looking forward to for a while. The fight that should have been ideally made with, instead of the Yoel Romero fight, which left kind of a bad smell in a lot of people's faces or nose or however they want to say it. But gosh, I love the idea of, well, I wish this fight was in Australia, but it's not. So it's not really somebody coming into somebody's backyard like I think we thought we were going to get. I got to go with this Adesanya. I think he's again smart. I think he'll be able to move. I think much like I think Reyes, I think it'll be very similar where he'll use his length and he'll just use his fight IQ to either find the shot or eventually frustrate Costa enough where he'll just win a decision and Costa gasses out trying to make too much happen. I'd love to see Costa win just for the drama and the potential that we could have for a cool little trilogy fight almost scenario between two currently undefeated guys. So I'd love to see it, but I think Adesanya wins. I don't know if it's going to be as exciting as the promoter would like you to believe, but I hope I'm wrong. I just the Romero fight makes me wonder if Adesanya is more about just keeping his title or taking people out while working his way towards the Hall of Fame.
I'm going Adesanya as well here. I think part of that Romero fight as well was on Romero's end too. I mean, remember when he fought Whitaker, he was still throwing bombs later in that fight, in that second fight. And so why wasn't he doing it against Adesanya? I think it takes two to tango. But, what it comes down to me is a couple different things. Adesanya is going to have a height and reach advantage in this fight, which is interesting in terms of the style matchup and everything. And then on top of that, you got to look at the kickboxing experience that Adesanya has. I feel like people really glance over that, and that is a lot to take in. I mean, he has a lot of experience heading into this, and not even just that, but UFC experience as well. In terms of overall competition, Adesanya's fought the better guys. I know they have a common opponent they don't have a common opponent, but they both like for example, like Adesanya's win over Brunson. That looks really good right now. Brunson's been on a nice, tear lately. Calvin Gastelum, that was a fight where Adesanya got rocked, was able to come back. It showed that Adesanya has heart if the fight goes later in the rounds. That's the thing. Like if Costa doesn't finish this fight early, is he going to be able to go 5 rounds? He went to a decision with Yoel Romero, but I mean, that was a 3-round fight. So how's he going to do if the fight goes a little bit later? That's where I think Adesanya has the edge as well. And I just think Adesanya is the better technical striker. As long as he doesn't get clipped, which I don't see happening, I think he's on his way to winning this one. And, people talk about Adesanya, this boring fighter. Like, he had like a fight of the year with Gastelum 2 fights before that. He knocked out Robert Whitaker, only guy at middleweight to knock out Robert Whitaker, and was just like an incredible fight. I just think Adesanya is the better fighter. And I think it's a case of where, fans love Costa more because he's more of an entertaining guy for every single fight, but they're kind of glancing over the fact that Adesanya has a nice body of work himself. So I see Adesanya either getting like a late finish when Costa gets tired, kind of like the Reyes Blachowicz fight, or I see him taking a decision in this one. But I think it's going to be a good fight. There's got to be some pressure on Adesanya, knowing that last fight was not very good. You're not going to, keep getting that money from Puma and everywhere else if you're putting on fights like you did last time. So I think I think he puts on a good performance in this one, and I think he really reminds fans that he is one of the best in the world. So I think Adesanya gets it done.
Yeah, it's hard not to pick him, given how his the way he's performed in his last few fights. I know not the very last one, but the thing about that last one is, people were talking about how they really weren't engaging and stuff like that. But that's when you're coming from the level of striking, like James said, a lot of people just glance over his kickboxing experience, but I mean, range and footwork is part of the striking arts. And Adesanya is going to take the time that he needs to find the range and the footwork that he needs to either make his opponent gas out or make the mistakes that he needs them to make to land the liver shots or the head shots or the stuff that makes them, to pop out to score the knockout like he did against Whitaker. I definitely can see that happening against Costa, just because the Costa's, coming forward and attacking. I mean, it's more of a brawling style. It's not as cerebral as Adesanya's is, but I do think it's going to go into the later rounds, and if a finish comes, it'll be on Adesanya's side in like round 4 or 5, unless, like you said, if Costa catches him early with something that hurts him. But I mean, his footwork and his head movement, and he just seems to he's too savvy, I think, to get caught early. He'll be expecting it. So yeah, I think we're all on the same page for that one. But yeah, so that's it. Those are our picks for UFC 253.
So you guys are even across the board, and I have Eubanks. You guys have Vieira.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to check the odds. I mean, like I've said on other episodes of this podcast, my picks for who's going to win is never who I throw down in the sports books. So we'll see what happens. I usually make my bets Thursday, Friday. I know, James, I know you discuss gambling a lot, coming from MMA Odds Breaker, and when I'm sorry I haven't watched your stuff as much often as I usually do. Jump in on your live
keep
chat,
up, man. It's pretty
Yeah.
tough. I do a lot of stuff, man. No worries on that. That's fine. So,
But I have two monitors. So at my day job, I have two monitors. So I usually leave MMA stuff up on one, and I work on the other one. And I've been working from home because of the COVID thing. So it's like I only have the one monitor, so I got to do the stuff for the day job, unfortunately. But
yeah,
James,
the gambling stuff's huge. Sorry, I just didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah,
Right.
I find more and more, especially this day and age, with gambling being legal in certain parts of the United States, like it's really blown up. I see a lot of people doing betting content now. Like I remember when I was working for Oddsbreaker, there was a handful of people. Now it's like everywhere. People are doing DraftKings, FanDuel, just straight up betting and stuff. So it's interesting. I love all that. That's why people are like, why do you tweet out the prop bets? Because I find it interesting. I think it's so cool to see how people are betting on fights and stuff. It's very interesting.
James, one quick question while we still got you here.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on Michael Chandler? He's obviously coming over from Bellator, former multiple-time champion there. As somebody who obviously is a fan of all MMA, what do you think he fits in that mix, and what fight would you want to see him in?
Yeah, I think it's a great move. I sort of expected this to happen because I just didn't see, a Pitbull rematch or a trilogy fight against Brent Primus being very lucrative for Chandler. I'm sure he would have made more money in Bellator, but I think there's a part of Chandler too that's, made a lot of money outside the cage. And I think he knows now it's like, okay, let's really see what I'm made of. He's in the prime of his career right now. I think he'll do quite well. I didn't expect Eddie Alvarez to win a UFC title, and he did. So, I mean, I'll never underestimate anyone coming over from another promotion. But yeah, I think it's a good move to see what he's made of. I think you could throw him in there with the Wolves. I think like a Charles Oliveira fight would be great just to see where he's at. I think Oliveira is one of those guys that, maybe rankings wise, he isn't where he should be. But I think that last fight against Kevin Lee really just showed that he's good everywhere. I mean, that striking looked amazing. And then, his pedigree on the ground as well. So I think that would be a good fight. I know they're trying to, I guess, do the Tony Ferguson fight, but obviously, I think Ferguson and Poirier really want to make that fight happen. So I think that's kind of off the table. Maybe like a Paul Felder, but I don't know. Is that the type of fight that Felder's going to want to, come out of his sort of soft retirement that he's on right now? I don't know if that's the fight to do it. But I want to see him tested. I don't want to see him fight like an Ally Quinta or like someone ranked higher in the rankings. I'd rather see what he's made of. It's not like Chandler's like a prospect you got to groom in the UFC. He's been battle tested. And here's the weird thing about Chandler too, guys. It's like, remember like Will Brooks beat him? You remember like he had a couple setbacks, like that Brooks fight especially. I remember he did the timeout, like he was done. Yeah. Like I thought like this might be the end of his career. It was a very weird moment what happened there. And he had obviously got knocked out by Pitbull as well, but then he got the knockout over Sidney Outlaw and got the knockout over Benson. So it's like, what type of Michael Chandler are we going to get? I honestly don't know, but I wish him well, because one of the things I hate with fans is that they always be like, oh, you're going to Bellator to end your career. Like, no, there's good fighters in Bellator. There's Bellator fighters that will beat a lot of UFC fighters. That stuff drives me nuts. Let's just be fans of the fighters and not the promotion. That's the stuff that drives me nuts. So I want to see Chandler do well. I think it would be good to see him go there. And, do I think he'll win a title? No, but I think he'll be very entertaining. And I think he'll win a lot of fans coming over.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Charles Oliveira. That's the fight that I was calling for, and then you mentioned Eddie Alvarez. I basically said let's give him the Eddie Alvarez treatment. Maybe he wins a title. Maybe he wins a title, but worst case, he's probably going to go like 4-3. But we're going to get to see 7 epic fights with Michael Chandler to end his career, basically. And you'll have the UFC, quote unquote UFC fans who will call him a bum and overrated, but then all the MMA fans of the world will get to. Just like Eddie Alvarez, we'll get back to look back at his, fight with Cowboy and Gagey and Melendez and heck, all the guys that he fought, all the name fighters. So yeah, man, I think that's a great idea, and I agree with everything you said on him. So.
Yeah, I do too. James, why don't you before you make your way out? I know you got another interview scheduled soon. If you want to go ahead and plug all your stuff and where folks can follow you, by all means, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. I do watch your show. I love being on. And Matt, one of these days, hopefully I'll get out to a Bellator card. We can grab a beer out there when I'm down there, when they'll let me out of this damn country. With COVID, I'm stuck here. So I haven't been to the States since March. So hopefully that'll change soon. But yeah, best way to get a hold of me, Twitter, Instagram, same handle, @Lynch on Sports. DMs are always open. If your audience wants to ask me any questions or anything that we talked about here today, happy to do that. And I post all my work up there too. But my YouTube channel, that's my baby, youtube.com youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. I keep it easy across the board there. That's where you're going to find pretty much all my stuff, because even the stuff I do for other outlets, I put it in playlists on my channel, so you guys can find the stuff there. I got a bunch of stuff coming up here for 253. I interviewed Jan Blachowicz. I interviewed Diego Sanchez. I interviewed a handful of other fighters on that card, and I got the pros picks, which I know people like, where I asked a bunch of fighters their picks for the main event, co-main event, and everything like that. So yeah. But more importantly, guys, thanks so much for having me on. And like I said, Ed, I definitely owe you a beer for that compliment. That was really nice of you. So I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you,
I have
man.
to let you out of Canada. I mean, I'm out of my mind. I booked today for BKFC 13 in Kansas. So yeah, I got to get back on the road and start.
I miss it, man. That's one thing. Honestly, I'm getting cabin fever. I haven't covered a single event this year live. I've done the virtual media stuff, but nothing live, man. And I got to tell you, I'm going through the withdrawal. Like, I love covering cards in Vegas. That's like one of my favorite things. New York's right up there too. Had some good times out there as well. That Bellator NYC card, Ed, that you were mentioning, that was like one of my favorite cards of all time, like to cover. Yeah. So that was like showing you, like, just, yeah, we could talk for hours about that, but I miss it. So Trudeau, I mean, let's figure something out here, buddy. Let's try and get let's make MMA coverage essential work, and we'll get me out there. We'll see.
There it is. Yeah. Fans can follow us at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Check us out on allaccessmma.com. You can follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMAHawk21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed on Twitter at Carbazol, at Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. Got it right this week.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, James, for joining us. Great talk, man, and nice to finally speak to you face to face. It's great.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime you want me on, you let me know.
Doors open, man. Thank you.
No problem.